There has been a far-right coup in France, essentially. That is what has just gone down. Macron has ignored, I didn't know this was a possibility. I didn't know France made it so this could happen, but this is coming from the Canary, which .co, which does good work. A lot of their work, a lot of their articles about Britain, where they're located. But French President Emmanuel Macron has ignored that the Nouveau Front Populaire, New Popular Front, left-wing alliance won the most seats in France's snap legislative election in early July, and instead has installed Michel Barnier, which I think is also a type of pastry. He has instead appointed a prime minister from the right. This party won 7% of the vote. So now the prime minister is the guy from the party that won 7%. Apparently this can happen in France. I don't know if it's ever happened before, completely ignoring the elections. And, you know, France, listen, you guys were good with the guillotine. Is it not time to roll them out again? They're probably still there, right? Look in the museums. They're still sitting there. They're ready to go, I'm sure. They're probably waving their arms. Coach, put me in, coach. Put me in. It's time for Rudy. Rudy should come off the bench. So I guess this guy's being named Gilly? Guillotine. So Barnier depends on backing from the far right. So he has to align with the far right to even have a majority. The National Rally came third with 143 seats. Le Pen, who is the far right, borderline Nazi, she exercised veto power over who would be the new prime minister in talks with Macron. Macron and her later agreed on the appointment of Barnier. Former investment banker at Rothschild and Company, Macron, made the choice to make the far-right kingmaker, demonstrates so-called centrists will opt for fascism to keep the left out. To say that in a more clear form, he's basically acknowledging, Macron and the neoliberals are acknowledging that putting in a far-right lunatic is better than having anyone who's actually left-wing. So the left-wing wins the election, and they just put in a far-right lunatic. Left-wing leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon said the election was stolen. He said the president of the republic has just officially denied the result of the legislative elections that he himself had called. So Macron called these elections thinking that the right wing was likely to win. And instead, the left-wingers in the country got together and won the election, yet he just ignored them. And he put in a right-winger. And so there are large protests going on right now in France. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets of several French cities on Saturday, September 7th, to protest against what has been dubbed an electoral theft committed by Emmanuel Macron. The protests were called by the center-left coalition New Popular Front in more than 150 cities across France. And you know how big that is? France doesn't even have 150 cities. So they literally built new cities so that they could call more cities to the protest. They had to build roughly 38 cities to make it to 150 cities across France, standing up and fighting back, furious over this right-wing coup. And as some of you may have guessed, I don't have any evidence that there was U.S.-backed pressure to make Macron do this. But here's the thing. France has largely become a vassal state of the United States and NATO. France is one of the most powerful countries in Europe, but all of Europe has now just basically given over to whatever the United States wants. I mean, this proxy war in Ukraine has been terrible for France, terrible for Germany, and yet they bow down and they go, yes, yes, whatever you want, big empire in the sky, whatever you tell us to do. And so it wouldn't at all surprise me. It seems quite logical that Macron is getting advice from the U.S. empire as to how to proceed in these matters. And that advice would, of course, be do whatever you have to keep the left out of power. This is also what we saw in the United States. It was a do whatever you have to keep Bernie Sanders out of power in 2016 and 2020. And that included ultimately putting Donald Trump in power. I mean, they greatly, Bernie Sanders would have beat Donald Trump at least in 2016. And they were willing to sacrifice that in order to keep the left out of power. So here is France putting a far right winger in power to just make sure that the left does not have any power in that country. That is the key. Make sure that the left doesn't come to power, because then you know what could happen is people could end up with things like Social Security and stuff. I mean, they have that in France, but I'm just saying, like social safety net stuff. France has already been talking about getting rid of the wealth tax on the wealthiest French people. They've been working towards, or actually they did raise the retirement age. So they're gutting their social safety net, just like we are in the United States. The thing is, ours started off as smaller than theirs. So when you start off with less of a safety net, then when you gut it, it's easier to gut. There's less to tear apart. There's less to shred, like they're doing across America, gutting things like child labor laws, because we really need to get those kids back to work. Listen, have you ever met a 6-year-old? Okay. Why are they not in the bowels of Amazon? Why is your 6-year-old not passing out on the warehouse floors of Amazon? That's what I want to know. Okay, so right-wing coup going on in France, likely U.S. backed, but we'll equivocate and say U.S. cheered on right-wing coup in France right now. So to all the protesters in France, more power to you. To all 150 cities, especially those of you who built your cities just in the past few days, so you can have 150 cities to stand up against this. More power to you. Keep fighting. Roll out the guillotines.